align strategy with growth, build a lean but powerful team, and make every dollar count? Well, our panelists have mastered the art of doing just that, scaling brands and proving marketing's impact in a fast-paced environment. Please welcome our panelists, Joanna Flower, Denise Persson, and Jennifer Johnson, aka JJ, and our moderator, Emma Hinchliffe, senior writer and co-chair of the Most Powerful Women Summit at Fortune.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you all so much for being here. What an amazing group we've got today. I'd love to start. You've all led marketing at organizations from early stages to mature businesses through key inflection points like IPOs. So from your perspective, when is the right time to start investing in marketing? Whoever wants to take that.
Should I start? I was very early on with Snowflake, but I think initially, I would say you would probably invest more on the product marketing side in the early stages, right? They can more help out in terms of market fit and those things. I think when it's time to get a CMO, that's more when you have verified that there is some market fit there, as well. So I think it's more, you probably want marketing quite early on, but it's for different type of marketing expertise you need at that point. And then again, when you get a CMO on board, that's when you really start building out your demand gen function and all that.
Totally. We'll dive into that too.
I think it's a really important distinction too when you need a marketing leader and when you're ready for a CMO, right? And so to your point, Denise, a lot of times in the earlier phases, you really need to get your product market fit and you have to get your narrative and your story right. And that's where I agree bringing in maybe a marketing leader that comes from a product marketing background is typically a good first step because it's typically a more technical product-led founder at that point. So being able to work with the CEO and work with the founding team and kind of pull that and tease that story out from a very technical place. I think product marketing is a really good place to start. And then when you get some scale, you can think about scaling the machine, building in branding. I think that's the right time to think about a CMO.
Yeah. So what is that profile of that first marketing leader you lead, and how does that change with time?
I think let's take the example of Snowflake, for instance. The first leader was more of a product marketing leader, right? Someone who really understood the industry very well, who could really help out with the enablement of our sales organization in the very early days, who could really reiterate on the messaging, all those sort of things. But this leader was not really someone with experience or background in building out all the other functions. But it would have been too early to bring on someone like me in those days. So I don't think there is a one playbook, that works for every single company. But it was sort of a journey that worked really well for us.
I think a lot of companies, especially in the tech industry, the CEO is the founder. It's the person that have created the technology and have the vision for the company. And that's why I agree with JJ and with Denise. You really need a marketing person to get into the head of the CEO and the founders and understand what is it that you have built. What value does it bring to the customer base? And how do we articulate that in a way where we're going to get traction? So you need someone that kind of is getting deep into the technology and able to kind of build a message, build a value proposition, understand where we can win, because you can't go after the mass market. You have to really focus on your ICP and who's going to be interested in your technology. So having interest, technology interest and depth in the industry will definitely help the first marketing person be successful and move on a marketing program.
And I think that's so key because a lot of times I think there's a natural tendency to say we need to get the demand gen leader in there because we need to get leads and we need to get pipeline. But until you've actually done that foundational work and really understand where you're targeting, who you're targeting, your ICP, speaking of doing more with less, the theme of this panel, you really want to be careful about not putting the demand gen engine until you actually know where you need to focus.
Yeah. So let's talk about doing that foundational work. You've talked about product marketing, but what are the first issues that a new marketing leader should tackle?
I was very early on in 4 different companies, most recently CrowdStrike. And one of the things I found was what made me successful as an early marketeer in the company was to really spend significant time with the CEO and also the CTO. Because I think one of the mistakes that I see founders making is that they hire a marketing person and then they don't spend enough time with the marketing person. You know, they don't let the marketing person truly understand the vision, where we're going as a company, where can we be successful, what are we disrupting? And the marketeer needs to know that in order to really then facilitate creating the right market positioning, creating the core message, the value proposition. So I think what's absolutely key in those early stages for any head of marketing, CMO, VP, whatever you want to call them, is to really give them access. And you know, I had the great benefit and privilege of speaking to the CEO of CrowdStrike daily, if not several times a day, and had the opportunity to spend time with customers, spend time with engineering, spend time with product. And it was the only way that I could fully then drive my team and the company's help with the messaging, help with the positioning and getting it right, and then start on the journey, because a brand is not built overnight. It takes a very long time. So I think fundamental to success is just getting access and building a really strong relationship with the technologist of the company and the CEO of the company.
Yeah, I think also understanding what sometimes I've been a multiple time CMO, and one time I literally was the first marketer, so I had a blank sheet of paper. Most of the times it's not going to be that case, but when you really are there at kind of the bottom, I think I totally agree, sitting with the CEO, and I remember in that role, I sat with the CEO for multiple hours while we kind of fleshed out, and you really have to tease out that story, and it's not like you can just sit down and read their mind, and even in one session, but you really have to spend time, and once you get that initial story and narrative, you learn a lot more about just the process and what you're optimizing for. And then I think, every other role I've had, and most CMO roles at this point, you're coming into something that you're inheriting. So there's, sometimes there's some things you need to, tear down and rebuild. Sometimes there's a really great foundation there and you're building on it, but you really need to understand, and as a marketer coming in, you really need to understand what is it, when everything needs to be done, what is the actual thing that is the real problem? Because there's always one problem above, or one objective above them all that's the most important. And I think getting that information, and I think that's on the CEO as much as it is on the CMO to make sure that you really understand what you're optimizing for.
Yeah. JJ, can you give us some examples about how you do that? When you're sitting down with your CEO, what questions are you asking? How are you teasing that story out of them and determining what story you should be telling?
Well, I think, in the beginning, it's what problem are you ultimately solving? Because I think I always say that it's a lot of times marketing is about messaging, and I think that's why there's a lot of times not very great marketing out there, is because I think there's this tendency to try to copy and repeat and talk about why you're why you're better, why you're faster, why you're cheaper, and those messages matter, but it's about positioning first. And that's one of the things that I always interview for when I'm interviewing, but also when I'm sitting with the CEO or a CTO, I ask what the problem was. And in the early days, you're talking to the person who saw the problem. They knew what problem they were solving by starting the company. So you have to tease that out. The narrative in the story is so critically important, and I think that and it's not just the CMO's role, it's actually the entire company and the entire leadership team's role to help the CMO get that story right, because it starts with the problem. And when you can frame the problem, you framed the problem in a way that you are the best and only answer. And so if you can really get that right, and it starts with what is your vision, what problem were you solving, and then a lot of things will tease out from there.
Yeah. Yuval? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Denise.
No, as a marketer, I think you're the facilitator of the positioning, but you cannot look at the marketer, okay, the marketer is going to solve this, right, for us. It's really, collaborative, team effort to come up with, okay, what is the position going to be? And also, it's so incredibly important to be very consistent, right, in terms of your positioning. And I think the mistake you see the most is that a lot of startups, every 3 months, there's a change to their positioning, right? And nothing ever sticks. And all your marketing investments, don't pay off either because of that lack of consistency.
Yeah. What risks do you run if you are not consistent in your positioning? If you are changing your messaging every 3 months, how does that harm the business?
I mean, positioning is all about really the battle of the customer's mind, right? So if you're not consistent, you're not going to win that battle because no one will ever know exactly what it is you do or who you are. But consistency is also about building trust as well. So I would say it's almost better to be 95% right than 100% right, but more be 100% consistent, with the message you're driving in the market.
And it's about repetition, right? I mean, it takes, there's multiple studies out there that it takes 16 to 20 times for someone to hear a message when they actually finally hear it. And so I always think when you're sick of saying it, that's the minute that don't stop, because that's the time when somebody's probably going to hear it for the first time. So it's all about repetition, and having that drumbeat in the market. So you obviously consistency is key to that.
Yeah. And I worked with a lot of founders, both advising and sitting in the seat. And one of the things I found is that they get very, very excited about the next thing. I actually have one true story. A CTO that I sat down with was so excited about telling me about their platform. And I think that he had 16 acronyms on the slide. So I think, where a marketeer can really help is, let's really dig into what is the positioning, what is the value that we bring, how does it actually work, and how do we put it into both messaging and storytelling and explanation that we can build on over a longer period of time, but it's going to resonate with extremely busy buyers that are hearing messages all the time. So I think the partnership between the technical side that has the vision and all the building these incredible technologies, matching that with a partner in marketing to really make sure that we get the right consistent message out that is going to resonate, that is going to make people want to listen and learn what you really do, and then be interested in actually trying it, experience it, becoming a customer.
Yeah. Joanna, you spoke about the importance as a marketer of getting in your CEO's head. Mm-hmm. But if you have a CEO who is, not necessarily making the time to speak to you multiple times a day, what can you do as a CMO, as a marketer, to do that successfully?
I think that there is other ways of gaining the information. CEOs are extremely busy. Number one would be try to tag along with the CEO, go on customer visits, join them when they have partnership meetings, see if you can sit in certain meetings and just listen and understand, what are we building, what is the vision. This is very early on, obviously. But if the CEO doesn't have, if you don't have the ability to do that as a CMO, I would still encourage to see who else in the organization can give me similar knowledge and experience and access to information. So I find, spending significant amount of times with the product leader or a CTO or even engineering, and be curious as a marketeer, what are we building and why are we building it? You need to get deep enough into understanding the technology so that you can be in the forefront of facilitating the messaging, the positioning, etc. Another thing is, join the sales team, go out on, sales calls and listen into sales calls. When you're at conferences, don't just be the CMO that has put together the conference, but attend sales meetings and, I think Denise was just telling me she has her own accounts, at Snowflake, where she has relationships with. And it's super important for the head of marketing to not sit behind closed doors, but actually getting exposure to product development as well as the customer base. And there's a lot that can be gained from that.
I think that's such an important point. I love that, by the way. I think it's an important point. The CMO really has, I think, an interesting role in that they really do in some ways sit between the product and the sales team, in the sense of you have to pull the technology and the vision out from the product team, but you also, I think the link to where the sales team and the customer is at is super important, because I've been in situations where we've been in a visionary category and we're probably 2 to 3 years out ahead of where our customers are. And on one hand, that's a good thing because people want to buy vision and they want to see vision, but you can't put your sales team out there with something that they can't sell today. And I think the CMO always needs to keep a lens. It's a delicate balance between staying out in front, because that is your differentiation in a lot of times, versus meeting your customers where they're at and bringing them along on the journey. And I think the CMO can really add a valuable role. They have a very valuable role to play as part of that journey.
Yeah.
No, and you need to really find ways to get feedback from customers, at scale. So in the early days, for instance, on Snowflake, every Friday we sat down with the sales engineers and asked them, okay, what are the top 10 things you heard this week? What were the main objections? What are customers asking about? And that's how we got kind of the feedback from the market, right, on a weekly basis. And then, our job was really around building content around how do we address these different questions coming up from customers. That's basically how our whole content strategy was built around the feedback we always got every single week from our customers. And also, how do we scale and help our customers handle those objections? So every single objection that came in, the next week we had a video completely addressing that question, right? So they could address that question at scale all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, JJ, you spoke about this relationship between sales and marketing. Ultimately, what should that relationship be? Is your role as marketers to facilitate sales? Is it more than that? How should that relationship look like?
If a CMO, it doesn't matter what their background is, but if a CMO is not sales-minded and pipeline-minded, they're probably not going to be a CMO for very long. And sales is, there's many important stakeholders in the organization, but sales is always probably number one on my list, at least as CMO. And what matters to our CRO is what matters to me. We have to stay aligned. I do think it's an important relationship, though, to make sure that it's a relationship, it's a partnership relationship. It's not a hierarchical relationship. Marketing's role, in my opinion, is not to be there to support sales in an administrative way. It's to partner. And we tend to look in different time horizons, where sales really lives in their 90-day time horizon, which they should. Marketing is really looking out 2-3 quarters out. And so you have to stay with sales where they're at, but they need you out in front, because when they get there, if you haven't already been out there building the demand and building the pipeline, not good things are going to happen, right? So you really have to keep that partnership and make them understand that you're in the boat with them, but you're thinking further ahead to actually build that funnel. But stating the obvious, the sales and marketing relationship is probably the most important one of all of them around the table.
And as a founder, I think the expectation you should have and say is that I want to have the most aligned sales and marketing organization on the planet. And I've seen situations and been in situations where CEO might give a very different objective to the marketing organization and different on the sales side, right? They say, okay, sales, okay, you should sell revenue, but marketing, I want you to focus on brand or something like that, only. And then after a while, the sales organization is going to feel I'm not getting, what I need from a marketing organization, and then you start seeing that misalignment, and then someone will be fired, essentially. Most often, probably the marketer. So I think for us as a founder or CEO, you really need to help facilitate that alignment as well. There's also a situation where the CEO says, but I want some healthy tension between sales and marketing. And often when you say that, it can often turn into unhealthy tension as well. And then also 6 months later, it doesn't work out. So
why do you think people say that? What is the point of wanting healthy tension?
I don't know. It's a very, very stupid idea, but it happens. Yeah.
I think one great question to ask your go-to-market team, because this goes beyond sales and marketing, and I think it also connects very much with product, is what is the customer experience that we are creating as a company? Right? Because at the end of the day, it's not about what marketing wants to do or what sales wants to do or how we manage customer success or what products we build. If you really are focused on the customer experience and you challenge your go-to-market teams, and I say teams because it isn't just one, you get them together and say, what do we want our customer experience to be? And it will be vastly different if it is, an SMB or consumer brand, or if it's large enterprise with a complex sale. But the more you focus on the customer experience, I think the more aligned you start making your internal departments, because it's all about creating that experience. And then you can look at setting goals and objectives and metrics, and you can go even further than that and start thinking about what technology foundation are we building for our go-to-market team. One thing that I just can't stand is when I hear a sales team saying, we bought a technology that is going to help us with demand or creating appointments or something like that, or technology that is a sales investment, and then marketing has their investment and support has their investment. You should think about what is the technology foundation that we're building, and I think it's going to be even more critical now in the world of AI. And then how do we, on top of that, set the right expectations and goals as a team, and how do we then really make sure that we are very customer-centric in our approach? And it changes the conversation because you then automatically align your go-to-market functions with the customer in mind.
Mm-hmm. As we mentioned, the official topic of this conversation is doing more with less. So let's talk about efficiency, hiring lean teams. Where do you need to hire first? Where can you get away with not investing right away? Where do you invest later?
I think it goes back to who you're hiring as your first leader, because the one thing that we call it the unicorn CMO is I haven't met the person yet who is the equal expert in branding and product marketing and category creation, but is also equally as analytical and a demand gen focused leader. I mean, you have to have an element of all of those. You have to be able to lead all of those, but you're always going to have what I call your major and your minor. You're going to have that thing where it's either the function that you grew up in before you became CMO or the area that's aligned to your skill set. So I think first is when you hire the leader, understand what you're hiring and what you're optimizing for, and then make sure that that leader is building a team around them to make sure that they're also hiring strength in maybe areas where they're not naturally as strong. So I think that is really the key. And I think it goes back to our earlier discussion. If you're, for example, if you're hiring someone who has more of a product marketing background, you want to make sure that there is a solid team underneath them that is the data-driven, the demand generation, the operational, that can kind of balance them out. And then I think as you go, you'll understand when kind of to bring in some of the other functions as you scale.
Yeah. And also early on, of course, I mean, everyone is wearing different, hats, right, and do many different things. And then as you grow, you're going to become more specialized in that function. And I think everyone usually finds sort of the passion, right, where they want to, specialize. So I think in the beginning, you need to have those people who are, again, able to do a lot of different things as well.
Yeah. For those of you who have led organizations through IPOs, would love to hear about how you prepared for that specific moment in a company's life. How does your marketing shift, if at all, leading up to it? What changes as you get to that stage?
I think the number one or two things, of course, you need to have a very predictable demand gen pipeline building engine, because it's not about, of course, that IPO is not the goal. It's more what you can do, after. So you cannot lose your eye on that. There's no point in doing an IPO if you cannot really show that growth after. And I think the second thing is around, of course, positioning, that you need to sort of have that almost completed probably a year before. Because again, if you go into an IPO and you're not clear on that positioning, then the bankers are going to take over and they're going to tell you what your positioning is going to be. And even if you have that positioning, right, and go through that process, the bankers are going to have a lot of opinion on that. And who knows your customers the best? Is it you as a company and a market organization, or the bankers? So if you don't have a strong conviction and a strong position already, again, you're losing control of that.
Yeah. Any examples that come to mind of what you did when you were leading through IPO?
Well, I think we were pretty clear a year before. We went into with this whole data cloud, positioning, right? And this was done. It was done about a year, before, and it was such a strong positioning. It was very. Our customers had pulled us in that direction too. It was really the right positioning for Snowflake at that time, and it wasn't that the bankers could come in and really steer us in a different, direction. If you come in and you're uncertain about that position, or when bankers are talking to your customers and they're telling something completely else, right, describing in a completely different way, right, then you're in a very difficult situation.
Drafting your S1 is not the time to figure out your positioning.
Exactly, yes.
I remember when I went through 2 IPOs, and the first one was with Tenable. I remember our first drafting session was there were probably 40 people on a call and in the room. bankers, lawyers, et cetera, and we couldn't, it took us 4 hours to get off the first paragraph because everybody had an opinion. And so I called one of the bankers on the side and I said, would you mind if I took a pass at just writing it? It's not going to be perfect, but it'll be something that we can work off of, because we had already done a lot of that work around our category creation and our point of view and our narrative. And I think if you can come to the table with that, it's always going to be it's always going to need to be adjusted and tweaked here and there. But if you can come with a 70% done or solid narrative to start with, you're going to be much better off.
No, I was in that situation before. So this time at Snowflake, we took our head of content and messaging, locked him in for 2 weeks. And this was before, we had even chosen the bankers and everything. Locked him in for 2 weeks, and he wrote the whole business section of the S1. So when the bankers were selected and we started the process, we're like, here is the business section. So we had something to start on, and we had already a control over the narrative and the positioning. And of course, there was some feedback making it better, but it stayed pretty much intact through that process.
Yeah.
And also, we didn't have to say 20 people in a room arguing around one sentence. Yeah.
And a lot of companies, they start thinking 18 months before in terms of kind of getting their back office ready, right? The predictability, being able to you even start kind of practicing closing the books and how long it takes and all of those things. I think, align that with your marketing efforts, right? Use it as an incredible platform to get your message right for all the audiences, because now you're adding a whole new set of audiences going beyond your customer base. But it's also an opportunity to get all of those pieces ready, so when you are writing the S1, you're not doing it, in a room with 40 people.
Yep. Yeah, so don't let the bankers write it for you.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about AI. How is that changing the role of a marketer? How is the skill set that is needed changing, either for your CMO or throughout the marketing function?
I think there's no better time to be in marketing, I think. I think it's so incredibly exciting. And marketing is about being relevant, right? The one who's the most relevant is the one who's going to win, essentially. And to be able to do that at scale now, that's incredible. We're moving to true hyper-personalization in marketing. It will change everything. It's, again, not only a great time to be in marketing, but also a great time to be a consumer, too, because you're not going to be bombarded with irrelevant messages. So I think this journey now moving into complete hyper-personalization is super exciting. It's a little bit different for us, of course, in B2B. But everything we can do from the customization of the content, again, at scale. Everything we can do now in terms of predictive analytics. For instance, I own the pipeline for the company. And the biggest challenge in B2B for most companies, suddenly you're in a quarter and realize we don't have enough pipeline. On the marketing side, there's nothing you can do. It's too late. As JJ said, right, we work 6 months, 9 months, a year out. But now what we can do in terms of predictive, pipeline measurement, and I can see, Florida is not going to do so well in 6 months. We need to change things now. And that's really how we can then allocate the marketing resources and spend in a very effective way. I think it's just game-changing with what we can do right now.
You talk about sales and marketing alignment too. What a better way to be aligned with sales is if you can actually bring data to the table around not just top of funnel and how we're going to generate the pipe, but actually how we're going to convert that pipe. And you start talking about pipe coverage and looking, 1 or 2 quarters out, you've completely transformed the value of the marketing organization even to the sales organization. And we're exploring a whole host of use cases. We're actually using Snowflake's AI very successfully. So we do, from a pipeline analytics perspective, we in marketing provide a report to every sales team every Monday morning, which is, here's where your pipeline is, here's where your coverage is, here's where you're looking 1 to 2 quarters out. Here are the 3 things that we suggest that you do this week as a sales leader to drive with your team to actually help you in quarter and 2 quarters out. Talk about transforming the relationship, and we're doing that today. Thank you to Snowflake.
We're very happy CrowdStrike customer as well. But yeah, and also the whole thing around propensity to buy as well. In B2B, right, it used to be that a seller comes in, oh, here are the 20 accounts that I used to work with at my previous company, but those accounts are most likely not relevant for your business. So now, right, when the seller starts, here's your laptop, here's your training, here are your top 30 accounts you're going to focus on, and here, by the way, is an account-based marketing program that's going to help you drive engagement at scale within these accounts. That's, we've come so far.
Yeah. You know, some people issue these broad proclamations that, you know, AI is completely changing marketing. Traditional marketing will not be applicable anymore. We don't need it anymore. So it sounds like you would disagree with that, but what is a realistic vision of the future of AI-driven marketing?
I think, of course, B2C is actually further than we are on the B2B side as well. And of course, in B2C, we're really seeing fully automated ad spend, you know, for instance, right, where everything is automated in terms of hyper-personalization of the customer you're going after to activating the campaign, I mean, everything. So I think B2C is kind of further ahead of us. But I think for us on the B2B side, it's more really around everything around, you know, content creation, for instance.
Yeah.
Our SDR organizations is a big investment for us, right? They're often coming out fresh out of college, training enablement really, really hard here. So for them now to have the right content at the right time to put in front of the right, you know, audience is pretty game-changing and just making that whole process so much more effective.
I think it'll change. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's a really exciting time, and I think you're doing this at Snowflake. I've definitely seen it in some of my companies that I'm involved in. Is kind of, you know, creating these little task forces, right? Because how you can use AI, you can use it, to your point, in content creation. You can use it for product launches. You can use it for sales enablement. You can use it for campaign creation. The list goes on. So I think it's an exciting time. And the marketing teams that are kind of, you know, driving positive change are the ones that are actually stepping up and saying, I'm going to dedicate some time for people that are interested in the marketing team to really explore where this can take us. So I think, you know, we're still in very early innings, especially in B2B, but it's an extremely, extremely exciting time. And I will say that if your marketing team is not exploring this, and if your marketing team is not spending some time on this, they're going to be left behind. So it is absolutely critical to, you know, embrace it and take advantage of it and figure out how it can really, you know, help you as a marketing organization to have an even greater, more efficient team as well as impact on the business.
Yeah, I mean, to echo both of the comments here, I mean, it's not going to replace, but it will help augment and help accelerate. And what we're doing is we've given everyone on the marketing team a ChatGPT license, and we've also built our own internal instance of it so we can put proprietary information in there. And what we do is we actually surface interesting use cases, because you'll be surprised. I mean, you'll be, you know, I'm amazed every day when I see the use cases that the marketing team is coming up with on innovative ways that they're using ChatGPT, not just to help with content creation. They're using unstructured data in our Salesforce to come up with personalized emails down to not just the account, but the person. I mean, it's unbelievable the types of things that I'm seeing. So I think it's just give it to your team and see what they're going to come up with. And I think with everything, you're going to see that there's people who will, you know, not embrace it, and then there's people who are going to dive right in and be the early adopters of it and are going to help bring others along. But I'm really excited to see. I think that's, you know, one of the great things about being in marketing is it's always changing and it's always dynamic. And I think we're going to see transformation on a scale we haven't seen in a long time because of AI. I also think that it's going to help shift the profile of what we need. I think there's definitely productivity gains, and you can look at where you might not need as many people over time, but then I think you can also look at, do you have to invest in different areas? And I was talking to our CFO the other day, is, you know, when during COVID and right after COVID, everything was about digital, everything was about virtual. We know the story there. And so there was a lot of investment in digital channels, and that doesn't go away, but what we're seeing at least is this kind of the pendulum swinging back a little bit to these in-person, higher touch experiences. And granted, they can't all be that. You have to balance it and understand where you're putting different programs in as part of the journey, but you can't automate a high touch experience, right? And so I think it's looking at where you can invest in AI to get efficiencies on one side, and then where you can actually repurpose or redeploy resources to actually be able to build those connections that that need human beings.
Yeah. What are some things that you all have done as leaders over the past few years to really prepare yourselves for this transition, upskill in a way and get ready for this next era? As obviously you're talking on a strategy level, but what have you done as individuals for that?
I think also, we are a larger market organization now, and clearly those who are more the ones who like to experiment, test new things, kind of the innovator kind of people, almost the type of people you had early on, right? In terms of size, and then there are those people who are a little bit afraid of it, right? You have the spectrum of those two people. So what we have had now for about a year is we have an AI council with those people who really want to dive into this, right? And then everyone else feels a little more, okay, good, we actually have a team who's helping us with this. And the council also helping kind of educating the rest of the team, right? You cannot just have 300 people out there, okay, you guys go out and start using AI right now, right? It creates a little bit of chaos, right? But having that group of people who are kind of really just spearheading kind of the innovation and testing things, and they're out, meeting other people, learning from others, bring those learnings back in terms of, okay, what is working for us and what doesn't. So that has worked pretty well for us.
Yeah, we're looking at, again, building centralized, across the company, a centralized team that is going to help work with, as a centralized, almost like a center of excellence, if you will, to work with the different business units and functions to understand their processes and help identify areas that might be, top candidates for deploying AI and helping taking the teams through it. But we as marketing kind of, chaos or not, we went all in. We gave everyone a ChatGPT license and said go. And I think that, we had our whole marketing team together 6 months ago, and we actually had an AI innovation contest. And every team got together and came up with innovative AI use cases for marketing and presented it to the rest of the team. And the winners got their ideas funded. And it really sparked this, not just this positive competition, but this notion of innovation. And I think as marketers, one of the most valuable skills we all need to have from the CMO down is intellectual curiosity, and we have to be able to stay ahead of things and learn, because if you don't, you're probably in the wrong role if you don't want to learn and adapt. So, I think that this is just another opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Let's talk about this idea of creating trust that's come up. Why is that important, especially when you get to a moment where things don't go as planned, when you really need the trust of your customer when you're navigating through a crisis, maybe at CrowdStrike?
Well, we have I was just talking to these women before that, our brand was really resilient through the whole incident and the response, because brand really isn't, as we know, brand isn't just something that marketing drives. Brand is every touch point with the company. It's everything that we do to put the customer first and live through, and our actions speak the way our words speak, and we walk the walk and talk the talk. And the company, well before my arrival, and I have a wonderful predecessor here that helped build that, but everything that the company did to build that trust really helped carry through. And in that moment, it wasn't just that it happened, it was how we responded. And we kind of all went back to that notion of like putting the customer first, and if you focus on the customer, great things will happen. Our CEO, George, always says that. And it was a moment in time for us, and of course, we can't have that happen again, but customers understand, and they're going to stick by you. And I think how you respond to things is as important, if not more important, than actually the event itself. But I mean, those are the things that create that trust and that connection. And we have customers that not only are sticking by us, but are more committed than ever to us now because of how we responded and how we were there for them. I mean, Johanna, what were your thoughts? I mean,
well, and I think you need to decide who you are as a brand and who you are as a company. And I think it's very difficult, when you're in the situation, but reflecting back on it, it's, trust, transparency, doing everything that you can for your customer. And, not being on the inside of CrowdStrike anymore, I was, so impressed to see kind of how the team rallied. I do think you're right. You don't want to create a trustworthy brand when something happens. You need to build it from the start, because you need people to really have the trust in you. So when something happened, you have the opportunity to kind of resolve it by being transparent, supporting your customer to get back to health, and the opportunity to kind of, really owning it.
Yeah, thank you for going through all of that. What is one thing that you wish not necessarily your CEO, but CEOs, founders in general, understood about marketing?
There's so many things, but I will pick on one thing, and this was something that a board member actually said to me many years ago. I think for many CEOs, it's a little bit of a black box, and it costs money, right? And they're not sure if it's really going to yield the return. And, a lot of CFOs and CEOs, they think metrics, they think numbers. I think one of the recommendations I always have to CMOs is you need to be numbers driven. You need to know your data. You need to know what's working and what's not working. Don't fluff it. You have to know what's going on in your business. Treat it as a business. And I think the other thing is it's hard to go out and benchmark and say, this is what everyone else is doing. There is always some nuances. So a board member said to me many years ago, he said, when I asked him, I said, how are you thinking about my performance as a CMO and my team's performance in comparison to everything else you see? And his response was, don't think about it that way. Think about it as make sure you set the foundation and then own it and grow it from there, because that's the best thing that you can do. Because if you have your foundation and you understand what's going on and you stay true to your statistic, you stay true to your goals, and you drive your team in that right direction, you will see it improving over time. And I think it's a really good advice, because I've been in board meetings when numbers fly out, the benchmark should be this, and why don't we have that? And it's very, very difficult for a CMO, but you need to own where you're starting, where you're heading and why, and then own the performance of yourself and your team.
Wow. Denise, what about you?
No, I think you need to give sort of marketing, a metric that fully aligns with the sales organization. So, for instance, then at Snowflake, right? This was our CEO, Frank Slutman, comes in and said, okay, marketing owns the pipeline. That drives the right behavior for the marketing, side as well. If you're measuring marketing on something like, MQLs, right? We can turn the dial on that number easily, right? On a daily basis. It doesn't mean anything to sales, but the fact that we own the pipeline really drives the right behavior. It drives the behavior that really matters to the sales organization. But then also, every company is different. A company like Snowflake, which is really infrastructure sales, we're selling through a sales team. It's all about driving sales efficiency, right? There are other companies that are more fully almost marketing led. Then it's different metrics you're looking at, but you need to kind of understand what is the kind of metrics for this type of organization that you should, give to marketing.
Yeah, there's not a lot of patience out there, and understandably so. But I think that it's maybe not having patience, it's just understanding that everything can't be done immediately, perfectly, like all at once, right? And so I think as a CEO working with their CMO, really be clear about what it is that what is the most important objective to solve for, and then give them a clear measurement of success so you're jointly understanding together where you're going. And I think for CMOs, I think then it's also having a point of view and a vision. It's kind of going back to position yourself or be positioned. If you lay out what you're doing and where you're going and how everything's building, it's a roadmap, then you can clearly kind of point to where you're at, and things might need to adjust and you might need to move faster on certain things as you go. But if you've laid out where you're going, it makes the whole relationship a lot easier.
And that goes back to what we started off talking about, which is you need to understand the vision of the company. You need to really align yourself with the company goals. So it's not really about creating, marketing metrics or marketing goal in isolation. You really need to have the CMO really in line with where are we going as a company and why, and how we're building our corporate initiatives to get there, and what piece does marketing play in making that happen, and really making sure that all aligns.
Amazing. Well, thank you all for an insightful conversation.
All right, thank you. Thank you.